In the Victorian era, children were often found wandering alone or in gangs for safety, victims to poverty as much as their parents, having been sent out to work at an age little more than babies to support their families, either to buy food or alcohol. But they also found their way onto the streets from broken homes or abusive parents. Indeed, some were orphans. Many had homes, but life was so bad that the cold and lonely streets seemed preferable. However, they found their way onto the streets. Either by running away from trouble at home or having been sent out to work or beg, they were forced to grow up quickly, become streetwise, and learn to survive in a mean and dangerous world. Today, you will hear the story of a boy who ran away from home and onto the mean and unforgiving streets of Victorian London. This account, from the 1840s, is told by Henry Mayhew, a 19th-century journalist. Mayhew observed and documented the lives of everyday people in London, interviewing the working classes and making a record of his conversations. He went into great detail about what life was like for the many and not the few in the capital, which, at that time, was perhaps the richest city in the world. He describes, with first-hand accounts, how hard life really was for the capital's poor. You will discover how our protagonist was born to a life on the streets. The boy was the neglected child of a violent father who did little work, but a lot of drinking, and a mother who did her best to earn money to keep the family together. He was sent out onto the streets at just 5 years of age to earn money under threat of harsh punishment should he come home without earning the money his father expected. It is quite an incredible tale of how a small boy managed to survive on the streets by selling anything from matches to rags, or even singing songs for money. And, despite falling into gambling, bad company, and doing time in prison, he managed to pull himself up, start again, and do well in business, such that his children weren't born into the same dreadful world that forced some children to beg, steal, or starve. Before we move on, if you're interested in history like this, and you want to find out more about what life was really like for people in the past, please consider subscribing for more content. If you'd like to support what we make for you, check out the description for links to ways you can help us continue bringing the past alive. The following narrative, relative to this curious class, who, in many respects, partake of the characteristics which I have pointed out as proper to the mountebank of old, was taken from one of the fraternity. It may be cited as an example of those who are bred to the streets. "My father and mother," said he, "both followed a travelling occupation and were engaged in vending different things, from the old brimstone matches up to clotheslines, clothes props, and clothes pegs. They never got beyond these. The other articles were thread, tapes, nutmeg graters, shoe ties, stay laces, and needles. My father, my mother used to tell me, was a great scholar, and had not always been a travelling vagrant. My mother had never known any other life. I, however, did not reap any benefit from my father's scholarship. At a very early age, 5 or 6 perhaps, I recollect myself a poor little neglected wretch, sent out each day with a roll of matches, with strict injunctions not to come home without selling them, and to bring home a certain sum of money, upon pain of receiving a sound thrashing, which threat was mostly put into execution whenever I failed to perform the task imposed upon me. My father seldom worked, that is, seldom hawked, but my mother, poor thing, had to travel and work very hard to support 4 of us. My father, myself, and a sister, who is since dead. I was but little assistance, and sometimes when I did not bring home the sum required, she would make it up, and tell my father I had been a good boy. My father was an inveterate drinker and a very violent temper. My mother, I am sorry to say, used to drink too, but I believe that ill usage drove her to it. They led a dreadful life. I scarcely felt any attachment for them. Home we had none. One place was as good as another to us. I left my parents when scarcely 8 years old. I had received a thrashing the day before for being a defaulter in my sale, and I determined the following morning to decamp. and accordingly, with my 9 pennyworth of matches, the quantity generally allotted me, I set out to begin the world upon my own account. Although this occurred 25 years ago, I have never met my parents since. My father, I heard, died a few years after my leaving, but my mother I know not whether she be living or dead. I left my parents at Dover and journeyed on to London. I knew there were lodging-houses for travellers in every town. Some of them I had stopped at with my father and mother. I told the people of these houses that my parents would arrive the following day, and paid my twopence for the share of a 3rd, 4th, 5th, or even 6th part of a bed, according to the number of children who inhabited the lodging-house upon that particular night. My matches I could always sell if I tried, but I used to play my time away, and many times night had arrived before I thought of effecting sales sufficient to pay my expenses at the Beggar's Hotel. Broken victuals I got in abundance, indeed more than sufficient for my own consumption. The money I received for the matches, after paying my lodging and purchasing a pennyworth of brimstone to make more, the wood I begged at the carpenter's, I gambled away at cards. Yes, young as I was, I understood blind hookey. I invariably lost. Of course, I was cheated. I remained in a lodging-house in Mill Lane, Deptford, for 2 years, discontinued the match-selling, and, having a tidy voice, took to hawking songs through the public houses. The sailors used to ask me to sing, and there were few days that I did not accumulate 2 shillings, 6pence, and from that to 4 shillings, especially when I chose to be industrious. But my love of pitch and toss and blind hookey always kept me poor. I often got into debt with my landlady, and had no difficulty in doing so, for I always felt a pride in paying. From selling the printed songs, I imbibed a wish to learn to read, and, with the assistance of an old soldier, I soon acquired sufficient knowledge to make out the names of each song, and shortly afterwards I could study a song and learn the words without anyone helping me. I stopped in Deptford until I was something more than 12 years old. I had then laid the songs aside, and taken to hawking small wares, tapes, thread, etc., and in the winter seasons I was a buyer of rabbit and hare skins. I kept at this for about 3 years, sometimes entirely without a stock. I had run it out, perhaps gambled it away, and at such times I suffered great privations. I never could beg. I often tried, but never could. I have approached a house with a begging intention, knocked at the door, and when it has been opened I have requested a drink of water. When I was about 16 I joined in partnership with a man who used to make phosphorus boxes. I sold them for him. A piece of phosphorus was stuck in a tin tube. The match was dipped into the phosphorus, and it would ignite by friction. I was hawking these boxes in Norwich, when the constable considered they were dreadful affairs, and calculated to encourage and assist thieves and burglars. He took me before the magistrate, at the Beak's own private house, and he being equally horrified, I was sent to prison for a month. I have often thought since that the proceeding was illegal. What would be said now if a man was to be sent to jail for selling lucifer matches? In Norwich prison I associated with the rest, and if I had been inclined to turn thief, I had plenty of opportunities and offers of gratuitous instruction. The separate or silent system was not in vogue then. I worked on the treadmill. Dinner was allowed to be sent in on the Sunday by the prisoner's friends. My dinner was sent in on the first Sunday by the man I sold the boxes for, as it was on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, but I had lost it before I received it. I had always gambled it away, for there were plenty of opportunities of doing so in the prisons then. On leaving the jail I received 1 shilling. With this I purchased some songs and travelled to Yarmouth. I could do best among sailors. After a few weeks I had accumulated about 8 shillings, and with that sum I purchased some hardware at the swag shop, commenced hawking, and cut the vocal department altogether. Still, I gambled and kept myself in poverty. In the course of time, however, I had amassed a basket of goods, worth perhaps £3. I gambled and lost them all in one night. I was so downcast and unhappy from this circumstance that it caused me to reflect seriously, and I made an oath that I would never gamble again. I have kept it, and have reason to bless the day that I made so good a resolution. After losing my basket of goods, the winner gave me articles amounting to a few shillings, and I began the world once more. Shortly afterwards, I commenced as a rag-gatherer, and changed my goods for old rags, of course not refusing cash in payment. My next step was to have some bills printed, whereon I requested all thrifty wives to look out their old rags or old metal or old bones, etc., stating at the bottom that the bill would be called for, and that a good price in ready money would be given for all useless lumber, etc. Some months at this business realized me a pretty sum of money. I was in possession of nearly £5. Then I discontinued the rag gathering, not that the trade was declining, but I did not like it. I was ambitious. I purchased a neat box, and started to sell a little Birmingham jewellery. I was now respectably dressed, was getting a living, and had entirely left off stopping at common lodging-houses. But I confined my visits to small villages. I was afraid of the law, and as I was pursuing my calling near Wakefield, a constable inquired for my hawker's licence. I had none to produce. He took me into custody and introduced me to a magistrate, who committed me to prison for a month and took away my box of goods. I endured the month's imprisonment upon the silent system. They cut my hair short, and at the expiration of the term, I was thrust out upon the world heartbroken, without a shilling, to beg, to steal, or to starve. I proceeded to Leeds. The fair was on at this time. I got engaged to assist a person from whom I had been accustomed occasionally to purchase goods. He was a Cheap John, a street seller of household goods. In the course of the day, he suggested that I should have a try at the hand-selling. I mounted the platform and succeeded beyond my own expectations, or that of my master. He offered me a regular engagement, which I accepted. At times I would help him sell, and at other times I hawked with his licence. I had regular wages, besides all I could get above a certain price that he placed upon each of the goods. I remained with this person some 15 months, at the end of which period I commenced for myself, having saved nearly £25. I began at once the hand-selling, and purchased a hawker's licence, which enabled me to sell without danger. Then I always called at the constable's house, and gave a louder knock at his door than any other person's, proud of my authority, and assured of my safety. At first I borrowed an empty cart, in which I stood and sold my wares. I could chaff as well as the best, to entertain an audience with humour, and as good a salesman as most of them. After that, I purchased a second-hand cart from a person who had lately started a wagon. I progressed and improved in circumstances, and at last bought a very handsome wagon for myself. I have now a nice caravan, and good stock of goods, worth at least £500. Money I have but little. I always invest it in goods. I am married, and have got a family. I always travel in the summer, but remain at home during the winter. My wife never travels. She remains behind, and manages a little swag shop, a shop selling household goods, which always turns in at least the family expenses.